I'm Daniel James, and you're listening to 7am. One of Australia's most prestigious universities is now at the centre of 3 investigations and could be about to face a 4th. Last year, ANU vice-chancellor Genevieve Bell resigned after pressure over a massive restructure and the hidden role consultants played in shaping it. Now, 2 inquiries are looking at whether the changes meant to save $250 million were ever justified. A separate investigation is looking into bullying allegations against former Chancellor Julie Bishop. And Bell herself has been suspended from her ongoing role as a distinguished professor accused of serious misconduct. It comes as powerful firms are reshaping higher education. A recent Four Corners investigation found Australian unis are spending roughly $1.8 billion a year on consultants and contractors. Today we're bringing you an episode from 2025, where senior reporter for the Saturday Paper Rick Morton examines how consultants came to shape Australian unis and what that's meant for higher education. It's Sunday, April 19. This episode first aired in June of 2025. Rick, universities as a sector have been sounding the alarm for a long time that government policy, including funding cuts and student caps, has been having a big impact on their ability to function. So can you give me some examples of how consultants fit into that? How are universities using them?
So consultants appear to be coming in, and a great example of that is one I covered recently at University of Technology, Sydney, where KPMG were brought in, but were, essentially told, go and look at individual research output from individual researchers and produce a master list of those who are, not contributing enough profit to the university, which, as it was put to me, would probably contravene the enterprise bargaining agreement at that university, because you can performance manage someone for not meeting expectations. You can't make redundancies based on performance. That's not how this is meant to work. And so the consultants, of course, took a particularly corporate view across the board. They're looking at profit and loss. They're looking at ways to rationalise and centralise services. But the actual structure of a university is incredibly special for a reason. It's meant to be a kind of a distributed network of knowledge centres, faculties, people who are learned in their field, who contribute to the life of the university and who are cooperative in the way that university is run. And increasingly, particularly with consultants like the Nous group, which is one that we'll come to in quite a bit of detail, the advice is centralise all of your functions and, to the degree possible, handicap what it is the faculties and the academic staff are able to do and the say they have over the future of this institution, which would make it a lot more like a corporation and a lot less like a university.
Yeah, there are a number of consultancy groups involved in all of this, but you did mention Nous Group, which is a global consulting firm, and they do a lot of work with the Australian National University. So what did you find out about the role they are playing there?
Nous is fascinating, and I particularly zeroed in on them because I think they've had the most astounding growth off the back of their participation in higher education advisory services. And of course, this story was first being told through the Australian Financial Review. A former colleague of mine, Julie Hare, who's a fantastic reporter, was looking at, misgivings, I guess is one way of saying it, early on within the tenure of the new Vice-Chancellor there, Professor Genevieve Bell, and her Chancellor, Julie Bishop. Now, Genevieve Bell had announced this kind of $250 million restructure at the ANU because they said that they were running out of money structurally, and there were going to be 600-something job losses. But what they didn't do is tell anyone that they were using the Nous Group's advice or paying them for that advice. In fact, they were incredibly tricky with how they disclosed any mention at all that they were using external consultants to advise on this enormous restructure.
How widespread is the use of consultants across the Australian university sector?
I mean, they're everywhere. They are literally everywhere. I mean, KPMG was paid $8.5 million for business advisory, which is consulting at University of Melbourne. Deloitte was another $1.5 million. Griffith University has paid Nous, I think it was almost $2.5 million over the last 16 months. And then lots of kind of boutique ones that are even like a tier below now. So they're absolutely everywhere. And the irony is that universities themselves often have their own consulting output, but they won't use them because they're worried about pushback from staff and letting their plans kind of leak out into the public. The way the system has been built up, there's so much money sloshing around that to the extent that a firm wants to give you the tough advice, they're only prepared to do so if they think they can still keep getting work. I mean, that's just the sad reality, is that you're not necessarily going to be told anything you don't want to hear.
Coming up after the break, David Coch takes on uni bosses. Rick, late last year, the ANU were brought in front of Senate estimates to ask about the restructures you mentioned earlier, and David Coch was trying to get to the bottom of how much the uni had paid Nous Group for the restructure.
Thank you. Questions. Okay. Thank you, Chair. And just finally, is it correct that you've engaged Nous Group, and what work are they doing? Is it related to finding savings, or what's the scope of that work?
There was one example where the Chief Operating Officer, Jonathan Churchill, was asked, how much is this contract worth?
Yeah, thank you, Senator. We have paid now circa $50,000 so far this year.
Okay. 750?
50.
50.
Yeah.
Circa 50.
Yeah, sorry.
You're not...
With Nous. That's the question. Very easy to understand. How much was this contract worth? And what he said was, we have paid to date $50,000 to Nous. That wasn't the question, and it also wasn't correct as a standalone answer on if he had been asked how much he'd been paid, because the invoices at that point were about $450,000 to Nous. Now, we now know, when he asked this question on November 7 last year, that a contract for Nous had been signed and set in motion a month before, and that contract was worth $837,000. Genevieve Bell was also asked, have you used Nous to advise on the restructure? And the answer she gave was, I would argue, deliberately obtuse.
I initially engaged the Nous Group a number of months ago, Senator, to help think about how to look at the role and the changing role of universities in a global landscape. I was interested in what were the ways that universities thought strategically and what was a global survey, really. And then
what she said was, I brought them in early on in my tenure when I got the VC job to advise on the university's position in relation to other universities and how we're tracking. Now, that makes it sound like that's not involved in the restructure. That's not true. And of course, we now know, subsequent to that fact, that within 17 days of the Vice-Chancellor starting the job, she had authorised the pursuit of these consulting firms for an enormous restructure at the ANU. When it was subsequently emerged that David Coch had been misled, he was furious. And he put out a statement in April this year essentially saying that it was appalling and that he takes this incredibly seriously. And the conclusion he reached was that he had been misled by these officials because they didn't want to answer the question. And of course, after that, there were also a bunch of questions on notice, which through the parliamentary estimate system, you can take a question on notice, you can take it away, you can use all your resources at your institution, your department, whatever it is, and answer the question properly and come back and tell the Senate the truth. And it is an offence to mislead the Senate. There were several questions on notice that printed outright mistruths about the use of Nous Consulting and about the value of those contracts. They had to be recalled and corrected. The question that remains is, how did that happen? Who signed off on those questions on notice responses? The fact that there has been a pattern of behaviour here now has led people to ask even more questions that they might have otherwise been happy to accept the answers to, which is, what are your motives behind this restructure? Why are you paying Nous? And what are you doing with the advice that you're refusing to tell us about?
So a lot of secrecy and uncertainty around all this, but what we do know is that universities are spending a lot on consultants, which begs the question, shouldn't university management, people like the Vice-Chancellor and the people on the University Council, have a sense of how to make savings or where to spend money or how to structure their business? I mean, isn't that their job?
Yeah, that is their job and they should do it. We have a fundamental structural problem with universities and, you know, to some extent, they won't be financially sustainable while the government that funds and regulates them doesn't seem to care about their role in society. But VCs are paid, something around $1 million on average in Australia to do these jobs because we're told they demand an incredibly astute and sensitive skill set, which is to manage the academic output and the rankings and the quality of the institution with the business of running such a large organisation. But university councils have even fewer oversight mechanisms than a corporate board. There are no shareholders to whom they're accountable. There is no publicly listed ASX meeting for these council members. The VC, particularly at the Australian National University, the VC can only lose their job if they resign or if the council rescinds it.
So, Rick, what impact do you think all this will have on the university sector? The reliance on consultancy firms, the lack of funding from federal government to universities. What does the future of the university sector look like at the moment?
It's pretty grim. And staff are already overworked and overburdened, particularly academic and professional staff, are trying to just keep the wheels turning on these places that are being gutted. And, they tend to get gutted every other 4 years. There's always a restructure happening at a university at any given point in time. And, of course, university VCs didn't want to make these decisions on their own because there's so much political blowback within the organisation, so they'd get these consultants in. But, of course, now everyone's very cranky that they're using these consultants. So then you've got Griffith University now just hiring the consultants as full-time employees. Someone told me to look at the vice-chancellor's office at Griffith, and there's 2 employees there who were hired directly from NAS, who are principal consultants, who are now directing transformation within the vice-chancellor's office. So it's pretty grim. I mean, what does it look like in the future? We just keep cutting. And NAS themselves are quite explicit in their report where they interviewed the chief operating officers. They literally said that the academy's up for grabs. That's how they phrased it. It's up for grabs, which tells you everything you need to know, I think, about the way they see this.
Rick, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, mate. I appreciate it.
"7am will be back tomorrow with an episode on the Iran war and how it's created not just a humanitarian and economic crisis, but an environmental catastrophe as well.
What happened was that Israel struck 4 fuel depots and refineries in Tehran, resulting in massive fires, sending plumes of toxic smoke over the city, which led to these, horrifying scenes of black rain, effectively acid rain on steroids, as the oil mixed with a lot of the effluent that comes from burning oil, especially sulfur and nitrous oxide, but all these other really nasty heavy metals, other combustion products, an alphabet soup of toxins.
I'm Daniel James. Thanks for listening.